I now look to Angela Smith to continue the case for the proposition.
Mr. President, it's an honour to be invited here tonight to contribute to this debate. Now, I suspect it will surprise most people in this room to learn that this is actually my first ever visit to Oxford. Not because I'm a council house girl who went to her local comprehensive, but rather because I chose to pursue my postgraduate studies at Cambridge, where I researched the career of Dorothy Jordan, the great comic actress of the late 18th century. Whether or not her comic talents have been inherited by her descendants, a certain David Cameron, I will leave to you to decide. All I will say is that our political culture at the moment resembles the two faces of drama, because it is, of course, both simultaneously tragic and comic. No assumptions, please, no assumptions. The absurdity of our politics isn't just related to the fact that we have Boris Johnson as our Foreign Secretary, or that the left looks more and more like a fossilised imprint from the 1970s, and neither is the tragedy related only to the plight of people on low incomes or the disabled. Our whole planet is threatened with unsustainable rises in temperature, after all. And yet it seems to me that the most important factor in tackling this threat is missing. Governments and businesses across the globe, and we've heard about this already from the other speakers, may be taking the problem seriously. They are taking the problem seriously. But as individual citizens, are we doing the same? I do not wish to downplay the enormous impact that state intervention can, and indeed must, have to play in this area of policy. In fact, I point to two members of the opposing side tonight, Mr. Nasheed and Mr. Monez, as evidence of the impact that strong political leadership can have in the fight against climate change. I don't deny that public opinion in the form of campaigning has delivered great results. The Climate Change Act here in the UK, for example, and the Paris Agreement internationally. But the question remains, exactly how committed are our voters to decarbonising the planet? It is encouraging to note, we've heard about this, that only 13% of people in the UK dispute that climate change is happening. But it's also true that at an individual level, there is not a great deal of evidence of commitment to tackling the problem. Global air traffic passenger demand, for instance, has grown consistently year on year since the turn of the century, with growth this year expected to top 7.4%. And the number of cars on the road in the UK has increased from 27.1 million in 2000 to 31.7 million in 2016. In the post-war period, over a time span of about 60 years, the proportion of households with access to 2 cars has increased from 1% to 27%. There is then a disconnect between public policy and voter attitudes towards climate change. Altruism, which in its purest form relates to the health of our planet, I would suggest, and species other than our own, disappears as quickly as snow in spring when individuals are confronted with the need to change their lifestyles. Even green activists are not immune, I would suggest. A recent study by scientists at Cambridge University and the University of Vermont found that green activists take on average 9 flights a year. Many green activists will, of course, refuse to fly, but perhaps when they recycle, they will bear in mind that on average, they still eat meat or fish 5 times a week. British activists may also want to reflect on the fact that a lot of the wine consumed in our country has been shipped in from places like Chile and Australia, piling on, in effect, the carbon cost of the product. And I don't condemn that, by the way. I don't condemn it. Let's raise a toast to the conviviality and the companionship enjoyed by so many people over a decent glass of wine. But to return to the point, the majority of people, it appears, do not worry about their carbon footprint. For most, climate change is always somebody else's problem. It's a problem for government, for industry, for energy providers, but not for them. Most people are not willing to give up the pursuit of material things. More electronic devices, for example, and more weekends in Prague or Paris, or even perhaps just good old Penzance. It's not a problem for those of us who take life's riches for granted. We enjoy buying new clothes. We relish nights out like this, eating and drinking the best food and wine from around the world. We do not, in other words, want to forsake the fruits of capitalism. And that's the apathy we all face. In essence, my point here is that individuals who work hard want to play hard. They want to enjoy all the comforts offered by 21st century standards of living. Even those citizens living at the poverty level, so frequently described rather patronisingly as the left behind, do not want to forego the more limited access they have to the trappings of modern capitalist society. So what do? It's not easy, but I would suggest that progress in tackling climate change has to be predicated on accepting the power of self-interest in shaping human behaviour and human interaction with the world around us. And let's not do so reluctantly. Let's embrace self-interest as the most effective means of meeting the climate change challenge. Let's work with it rather than denigrating it as a poor relation to the more sublime qualities that human nature sometimes aspires to reach out to. Let's make sure, for instance, that when here in the UK we build the homes we so desperately need, that we build them to the highest standards. They cost more, but the reward is much lower energy bills. Let's encourage people to eat less meat but more vegetables, not because it's environmentally more sustainable, although of course it is, but because it's better for health. Live longer and save the planet. These are some of the ways in which we can change human behaviour, by working with self-interest and incentivising, as a consequence, the adoption of more sustainable lifestyles. But what difference will all this make, I hear you ask? I would suggest that progress on all of this is essential if we are to protect the policy frameworks agreed to reduce climate change. It represents a pragmatic way forward, building as it does acceptance of the need to reduce carbon emissions into the everyday choices people make. But more importantly, it also offers an opportunity to secure more soundly the civic foundations so vital to ensuring that ignorant, reactionary politicians, such as Donald Trump, are not able to unravel our international climate change agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case. I look forward to the debate and believe that we will win the argument, but would just finish on this note. If this union accepts by some strange alchemy the other side of the argument, I beg of you, please do not include in the list of habits to be curtailed or listed as politically unacceptable the consumption of a really decent glass of wine.